The Conductor's Watch. My name is Daniel Vallis from InformedChristians.com, a website ministry devoted to discerning current events from a Christian and biblical perspective. This video is a warning, but it is not a prediction. I do not know the future, but I can show you what is going on right now from a biblical perspective. Romans 13, and that knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. The key phrase in this passage is knowing the time. If you do not know the time, the rest of the passage will not make sense, or will not be urgent, or will not be tended to. And the author predicates everything on knowing the time. Knowing the time is so important to how we live as Christians. Understanding the time will then tell us and inform us of what we should be doing now, just like the passage indicates. And once we know the time, and once we realize how late the hour is, then we realize the urgency that certain matters need to be tended to before anything else, and need to be prioritized before anything else. And particularly when we know the time, when we know the prophetic time, and when we know that our salvation is nearer than when we believed, and when we realize that we are almost out of time, the two main priorities in our life have to be casting off the works of darkness and putting on the armor of light. Those are the two most important things for the Christian once we know the time. But again, it all goes back to knowing the time. Do you know the time? And do you know the right time? We are getting ready for a departure. We are expecting the gathering of Shiloh's people. The Messiah's people, the Christians, those who put their faith and trust in Him and who have made themselves ready. So in order to best find the time of our departure, whose watch must we go by? Can we go by anybody's watch or anybody's time? Can we go by the rabbi's clock? Can we go by the church's clock? Can we go by major teachers' clocks? No. The watch we have to go by in estimating our departure time is to go by the conductor's watch. The conductor's watch is the most important because that is the schedule that things are running on. And this is why it is so important that we have a biblical perspective of understanding the times, and particularly of determining the time and the calendaring methods too as well. And also taking into account the celestial clock, because that is the conductor's watch. And the more that we desire to be ready for our departure time, the more we must be informed and be aware of what is the time of the departure and what does the conductor's watch say. Not the rabbi's watch, not precepts of men watch. No, what does the conductor's watch say? That is what the schedule is running on. Because the conductor's watch is going to be the same as the engineer's watch. They're going to be synchronized. We do not know the day or hour. The engineer knows the true time. So again, to properly understand the departure time, we must not look at our watch, not our time, not our calendaring methods. We must look at the watch that the conductor and the engineer are using. And that's what we've been looking at and laying out on our timeline poster, which you definitely need to download for reference. It comes in so handy. I use it a lot myself. The Tapestry of Redemption. It shows the biblical calendar based on the methods that the Bible states, and we've shown and talked about that before. And we also show the celestial clock that is going on right now too, which is in sync with the biblical calendar that we're using. And that is extra confirmation that we're using the right calendar, because both of the watches that we've been looking at are synchronized. And primarily we've been looking at the major clock sign that we've been looking at regarding our departure time with the prophecy of Genesis 49:10, talking about Shiloh, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, how one day He would come, and He fulfilled the first part of that passage, and He was going to be a redeemer of all people, and we're waiting for the fulfillment of this second part, the gathering of His people. And this was re-echoed, this hope of this prophecy, and this particular prophecy by Paul to the Thessalonians too as well. This is what we're waiting for. This is our hope. This is our expectation, our gathering together unto Him. And so this hope is also tied indirectly to the celestial sign of Judah and Leo the lion. And even the wise men understood that that prophecy was linked to a celestial sign, a star, particularly Jupiter being the king's star, representative of the king. And they understood prophecy And then the sign that they saw in the heavens was confirmation of their understanding of prophecy too as well. They went together and they saw the time. They understood what time it was. And so likewise, we are looking to that same prophecy, which is also connected to a celestial sign. And that's what we see going on right now. So we are looking at the celestial clock in the heavens counting down that our departure time is nigh at hand. And we understand this by looking at the conductor's watch. And we know that this is a true schedule because he came the first time, and we are looking for him to come the second time and pick up and gather his people. Hebrews 9:28. So Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. We are looking for him to return the second time in the same pattern of his first time. So we're looking at the same celestial clock that the conductor was pointing to the first time, and so we are expecting their arrival and departure time in context of the conductor's watch as well, the celestial clock. And we talked about that time is running out on the celestial clock of when the prophecy is going to be fulfilled. And we also lay out on the timeline and have talked about it before, how this lines up exactly with the last generation. We talked about that in the booklet too as well. This time, this year, where we are right now, the celestial clock is perfectly lined up for the arrival and departure that the conductor's watch pointed us to. And we pointed out before that Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. It's not going to be coming around to Leo the Lion again for another 12 years. Not till the middle of 2027. So that's going to be way outside the time frame of the last generation and the lifespan of 70 to 80 years that the Bible gave us. We're already at the end of that. This time, this celestial time that is being pointed to right now on the conductor's watch is the time. There is no other time for this prophecy within this lifespan. Let that sink in for you. This is the time. There is no other time that this celestial lineup will be in this generation. We are at the time that the conductor's watch has pointed to. And we talked about before that in just a few weeks, it's going to be reaching the maximum end of that time frame. On July 14th, that is when the celestial time frame will no longer be engaged. And so we know that time is very quickly running out. We see that the day is at hand. Our salvation is nearer than when we believed. And that's the absolute max time frame. We talked about before that the Star of Bethlehem anniversary is on the 18th and 19th in just a few days and hours. We are running out of time on the celestial clock, the conductor's watch that we have been watching. And when we know the time, we know that our departure is near at hand. And the more that we look at the conductor's watch and are assured of the time and see how it matches up with the biblical calendar and all the signs around us, that arrests our attention with the priority that we must get ready. We must get ready for the boarding. We must make sure we are where we're supposed to be, ready to go. And we find ourselves in a very important time right now with multiple signs pointing that we're running out of time and we are so close to departure time. Again, we do not know the day or hour. Only the engineer knows the true departure time. We do not. However, we do have the schedule and the time frame, and we are quickly coming up on the marker when the clock is going to chime with the 1-year anniversary Star of Bethlehem sighted, which is a key part of the prophecy. So we're going to review a few things around this time. Several days ago, we had talked about the rabbinical Pentecost and how it was completely way off. It was out of sync with the harvest cycle by over a month. Clear violation of God's command regarding the spring feasts. And we have this laid out on the timeline, and we've talked about this for a long time. They are a blind guide because they are not following the conductor's watch. They are following a watch that they made up, their precepts. And that's why Christ cursed the rabbinical system, because it can no longer bear fruit. They were blind guides following stuff that they made up. The Bible tells us on the very first page that the sun and the moon determine the seasons and the days and the years. Not plants, not man's precepts, the celestial signs, the conductor's watch. That is what determines the time. And if you are following any guide who does not follow what the Bible says, you are following a blind guide. You will be deceived. Now, I've gotten a number of emails recently from different people who are pointing to some teachers online who are saying that the 19th of June is the true Pentecost, and people are getting all excited about it and emailing me about it. No, it is not the true Pentecost. It is nowhere near the true Pentecost. We talked about this before. What is Pentecost pegged to? What does the Bible say Pentecost is pegged to? Deuteronomy 16:9. 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. And so many people do not have a biblical perspective of Pentecost because they don't consult the Bible. God's word specifically tells us, start the count when you start harvesting the barley. Pentecost is pegged to the barley harvest start. Pentecost is not pegged to Passover. Pentecost is not pegged to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Pentecost is not pegged to some date that the rabbis picked either. No, Pentecost is determined from a biblical perspective by when does the barley harvest start. That is when the count starts. It will be different every single year. And this is why you have to watch every year. It's not something you can just make up on man's precepts and put down on a calendar and have it fixed. No, the Bible tells us that it's going to be pegged directly to the start of the barley harvest. We talked about this before, back in March 23rd. Right on the biblical Passover, that is when the barley was ready to harvest. It was white unto harvest then. And something you have to keep in mind with grains is when it's ready to harvest, you have to harvest it then. You can't wait too long because the grains start falling out of the ears and falling to the ground and it starts reseeding the ground again. So you cannot wait or delay. When the field is white unto harvest, that's when you have to harvest it. And that was the whole idea behind the saying that Jesus told his disciples about the fields being white unto harvest. That means it's harvest time. You need to get busy then. And so we saw in March, the barley fields around Jerusalem in Israel were ready to harvest right then at the biblical Passover, which was pegged to the celestial signs, just like the first page of the Bible tells us. So that was when the barley harvest was, and that's when the start for Pentecost happened as well. And then we talked about how April 23rd, the wheat was ready for harvest then too as well. And both of these signs, which the Bible tells about in context of the feast, are big clues that the rabbinical calendar was way off. They were not following the conductor's watch. And we talked about how 9th, the wheat harvest was largely wrapping up, which was not unexpected. And then Pentecost on the biblical calendar was 50 to 57 days after the barley harvest start. Depending on interpretation, we talked about that before, and it's on the timeline too as well. So Pentecost is way over already. It's been over. And then we talked about the rabbinical calendar, which is completely way off. That was 79 days after the barley harvest starts. And now you have people on the internet who are saying that Pentecost is going to be several days after that too as well. No, they are not following the biblical calendar. They are not following the conductor's watch. They are not following the Bible. They do not have a proper understanding of the time because they're not looking at the conductor's watch. So if we want to have a true understanding of the time and a true understanding of the departure time, we have to look at the conductor's watch. And we find ourselves in a very important time. And in just a few days and hours ahead, we have the 1-year anniversary of the Star of Bethlehem, when it was sighted, reminding us of the prophecy of Shiloh gathering his people. And on the Jewish day, this straddles the 18th and 19th. Again, we do not know the day or hour, but we just find a very important reminder that the departure is very near at hand. We also saw the reminders of the 7-day period with Noah's Ark, which also pointed directly to that as well, which we talked about in our last video. Multiple reminders telling us that we're running out of time and that departure is nigh at hand. And then just a few hours after the Star of Bethlehem reminder is the summer solstice on June 20th for Israel. And this marks the astronomical start of summer. And this is a major celestial event. Even ancient sundials had special notches to mark the summer solstice and the different solstices and equinoxes. This is a celestial marker too as well. So it's very significant that we find the Star of Bethlehem coming around on a biblical calendar 1 year right before the summer solstice, right before summer starts and right when spring ends. So the 19th is the last day before both the summer and the winter starts for either half of the world. Different parts of the world are going to have the summer start and one part's going to have the winter start, depending on where you are. So we are coming to a very important transition time astronomically and with the celestial clock with multiple signs right at this one time. And the clues about summer are very interesting because the Bible alludes to the concept of coming before summer and coming during the spring. And we see this also in the Song of Solomon passage that we looked at before. In verse 11, "For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone." And it's strongly, heavily alluding to the springtime is when our beloved, our Redeemer, our bridegroom is going to call us away. When the winter is past, then obviously spring is there. And that's what it's definitely pointing to, this springtime. And even makes other allusions to how the grapes are still tender. They're not ripe yet. They're still in the springtime growth. They're still tender. And it's during the time when the figs are coming out too as well. Multiple passages and hints are that it's going to be a springtime rapture. And so it's very interesting that we find ourselves with the Star of Bethlehem landing right literally hours before the summer solstice starts. We do not know the day or hour, but we find that the day is at hand. Now, an interesting trivia reminder, at least for those here in America, is that June 19th is also called Juneteenth or Independence Day or Freedom Day. It was when the abolition of slavery in Texas in June 1865, and more generally the emancipation of slaves in the Confederate South. But one interesting thing is a traditional song that is often sung on this day is "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." And that's often associated with this day and sung at different commemorations. So that's just an interesting trivia reminder and just catches our attention that that is at this time too as well. And of course the concept is based on Elijah being caught up into a whirlwind. Now we had talked a lot about how the enemy knows what time it is too as well. And last year, on May 26 in 2015, when they're doing a lot of other messaging too as well, they put out a Google Doodle regarding Sally Ride, the first woman in space, supposedly. They were commemorating properly her birthday, but also pointing out that she went into space on June 18th. But the Google Doodle that they showed was very suspicious, and a number of people commented on it at the time that it reminded them of the rapture, because they were showing different graphics of Sally Ride, and a little girl comes up and starts floating away up into heaven. And then they also show an alternate version where she's giving a talk and people just start floating up into heaven. It was very suspicious and raised a lot of eyebrows back in 2015, strongly hinting at the rapture. And it also reminded me of the recent thing that came out, Childhood's End, with children floating up into heaven, especially in a theater auditorium context. Very interesting that they put this out a year ago, pointing to June 18th. Now we have a poster, The Great Space Deception, that talks about NASA and how it seemingly is involved with the great deception that's going to be used to explain away the rapture. And we've got to keep in mind the enemy knows what time it is. They know the celestial signs, they know the Bible, they know prophecy, they know what time it is too. And they've been getting their disciples ready for years, and the mystery of iniquity had been working toward this time because they know the time as well. Now, since this is the 4th month and we are looking at the days ahead, a good reminder is Thessalonians 4:17 through 18. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words. This is a reminder, and it's just interesting that the reference lines up with this calendar too as well. And we've seen other reminders. We have the 7-day period of Noah lined up with the Noah events that we saw the other day too as well. We have a lot of reminders, but then we also have specific celestial signs pointing to this time as well. Also on the 17th is a movie coming out called The Last King. Very suspicious. The enemy knows what time it is, and they know that the last king prophesied is about to come onto the scene. They know that the son of perdition is about to be revealed, the beast, who is the 8th king, the final king in the prophecy that was given to Daniel. The last king is about to come onto the scene. And we talked about this in our video, Evil Purple, about they know the purple reign is about to start. The 8th king is about to come onto the scene. And this is what they've been getting their disciples ready for, building up to this time, because they know the celestial clock is counting down, the day is at hand. And they know the Son of Man is about to come and gather his ready bride, and then the son of perdition is going to be unrestrained right after that. And they are expecting him to make his triumphal entry very soon, within hours and days, because they are also looking at the conductor's watch as well. We see so many reminders that we are in the days of Noah and Lot right now, the days and weeks where we are at right now, are a perfect match for when Christ said he would be coming back. We have multiple things pointing to this time, and the enemy knows what time it is. They are celebrating even now. That Cernunnos, the horned one, the pandemonium, whatever you want to call them, Baphomet, the mystery of iniquity is about to be unrestrained, and they know that. They know what time it is. So they are making sure that they are all ready and that they are all awake. And even right now, they are showing in theaters 3 different movies, all with the same concept of the horsemen of the apocalypse. Right now. They know what time it is. They are celebrating right now. But most Christians are asleep. We do not know the day or hour, but we find that the time for our departure is quickly running out. And we are coming up on some very, very significant reminders and chimes on the celestial clock. So we have a high watch window in the days ahead. Again, we do not know the day or hour, but it does appear that time is very limited. Romans 13, and that knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Now is when we are called to be wise, when we are called to rise up, and to go out to meet the bridegroom. It is a very late hour, it is very dark. Therefore we are called to shine ever so brightly for Jesus Christ. And because we are looking at the conductor's watch, we know what time it is. We are rising up. We have heard the trumpet calls to go out to meet him. So we will meet him in the garden. We will spend time in his word. We will spend time talking with him. We will purify and sanctify ourselves so that we are ready, and we are where we need to be, ready for our departure. Serve Christ first and highest above all else. Maranatha.